Welcome to the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. It is going to be a great April here in 2022. The 2022 NFL Draft is going to be here in the sports entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas, Nevada. You're going to see the best of the best. You are going to see some of the best players in college athletics being chosen at the NFL level. And tonight's show on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, we're going to focus heavily on the upcoming 2022 NFL Draft. And more importantly, we're going to focus on certain teams and what they need to do in the 2022 NFL Draft. When it comes to draft positions, and when it comes to the selections of picks, there's something very, very important that a lot of people are not focusing on. As a matter of fact, there is one part of drafting that many people are excluding, and that is the actual draft order. That is where you are being selected, because there are some teams that are going to be lucky enough and they're going to be fortunate enough to draft high in the draft. There are going to be certain people who are going to be able to select the best of the best within the top 10 picks. They know they're going to be getting a stud. They're hoping they're going to get a face of the franchise. And if you play your cards correctly, you may get yourself a future Hall of Famer in the NFL. Now, I understand that there are busts, and I understand there are disappointments. There always are. But when you have a top 10 pick, and more importantly, when you have a top 5 pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, you are going to consider that magic bean a valuable magic bean. And with the second overall pick in this NFL Draft, there's been a lot of hype and there's been a lot of insight on the second overall pick. And more importantly, there's been a lot of reports that have come out about the second overall pick. It has been reported that the second overall pick is reportedly being shopped by the Detroit Lions. There has been reports that have come out that Brad Holmes, the general manager of the Detroit Lions, has been speaking to teams, and he does have an asking price for the second overall pick. Now, whenever you see a first overall pick, a second overall pick end up being flipped, there's a lot of intrigue around it. And majority of the time, not all the time, but majority of the time, when a team trades up into the top 2, it is for a quarterback. Majority of the time, when a second overall pick has their hands being dealt, it normally is because they want to get themselves a face of the franchise. Now, the most recent situation where somebody did trade out of the second overall pick is actually not that long ago. As a matter of fact, it actually took place a couple of years ago. Now, I want to take you back to that draft class because it's kind of going to set up my point here. So, yes, you had Washington. They drafted Chase Young. He's been a solid defensive end in the NFL. Last year, you had Zach Wilson. The New York Jets are hoping that he can be a face of the franchise. Nick Bosa with the San Francisco 49ers back in 2018 has become a top 5 defensive end in the NFL today. And Saquon Barkley, he had an excellent start to his career, started to fall off towards the end. However, the 2017 NFL Draft was the last time a second overall pick was swapped. And what that deal was is followed. The San Francisco 49ers traded the second overall pick to the Chicago Bears for a first rounder, a third rounder, another third rounder, and a fourth rounder. So the Chicago Bears, in the most recent example of a second overall pick being dealt, they had to give up not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 different picks just to move up to the second slot. Now, if you're the Detroit Lions, you could try to emulate and you could try to follow that model from the last time a second overall pick was traded. But everybody knows that you don't just look at one example. You have to look at more to really establish a pattern, to notice a trend with the second overall pick. So the year before, 2016, the Cleveland Browns traded out of that pick and it went to Philadelphia. So they traded the second overall pick and a fifth round pick to the Philadelphia Eagles for a first rounder this year, first rounder next year, a third, and a fourth. So it seems like the pattern has been set that if you want to get a second overall pick in the NFL draft, that you have to give up 4 picks in order to get it. So, is there any team in the NFL that has a lot of draft capital? Is there any team in this upcoming draft who needs a position bad enough they're willing to give up 4 different picks to get it? Because there's going to be a lot of speculation. And more importantly, there's going to be a lot of intrigue about what are certain teams going to be willing to do at the NFL draft. Now, the 2 teams with the most picks in this draft are the Jacksonville Jaguars and are the Kansas City Chiefs. They have a nice dozen draft picks in this draft. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars trading up to the second overall pick is not going to happen. They already had the first overall pick. They already know who they're going to select. It's most likely going to be Aiden Hutchinson, who has been the undisputed and unanimous decision at the first overall pick. However, the Kansas City Chiefs would be an interesting dilemma. The Kansas City Chiefs would be interesting because of the situation they have had this season. Understand that the Kansas City Chiefs, they don't have Tyreek Hill anymore. The Kansas City Chiefs do not have a lot of their defense back from the last couple of years. The Kansas City Chiefs have had a huge restock and a huge rebuild of that defense. Chris Jones is there, but you really don't see a lot of stars on the defensive end. Keep in mind that the defense is loaded in this NFL draft. Keep in mind that the 2022 NFL draft has been hyped up as one of the best defensive-minded drafts in this recent decade. So if you're Kansas City Chiefs, would they be willing to take a flyer on that? Would they be willing to sacrifice 4 of those draft picks in order to get the second overall pick? Would it be possible that they would end up going and trying to get someone, for example, the guy from Oregon, the defensive end, Kayvon? Would it be a good idea for the Kansas City Chiefs to go out and, considering they need defensive back help, maybe going out and getting a Kyle Hamilton, getting a Derek Stingley, getting a Trent McDuffie? So the Kansas City Chiefs could be an option, but let's also play out the other scenarios. The New York Giants, they have the 5th overall pick. They have the 7th overall pick. The New York Giants do have a good amount of draft capital in this upcoming draft. They do have a good amount of draft capital next year. So if you're the New York Giants, could there be a player that you're looking at with the 2nd overall pick that could be worth trading up from 5 to 2? How about a team like, for example, a team that desperately needs help on the defense, a team that does have a higher draft pick? How about a team like the New York Jets? I mean, the New York Jets have the 10th overall pick and they have the 4th overall pick, and they do have a good amount of draft capital for the next 2 years. Would they be interested in trading up to get the best defensive player in this draft class who is not named Aiden Hutchinson? Because Ahmad Gardner, the defensive back from Cincinnati, has been electrifying, and he has honestly had his draft stock be risen over the last couple of weeks. As a matter of fact, Ahmad Gardner is projected to be a top 5 pick and at worst a top 10 pick in this upcoming NFL draft. So you have the Kansas City Chiefs with their draft capital. You have the New York Jets and the New York Giants. They have a high enough draft pick that would be interesting for the Detroit Lions. And the reason why this would happen, and my angle on why you would do it, and my angle on why you wouldn't do it if you're Detroit. The angle as to why you would trade the 2nd overall pick is because you would get a good amount of capital and a great investment on your return if you do trade the 2nd overall pick. Like I said, The Cleveland Browns traded their second overall pick back in 2016 to Philadelphia, and they got a nice return out of it. San Francisco 49ers traded the second overall pick to the Chicago Bears, got a nice return out of it. And when it comes to the Detroit Lions, there is a good amount of teams, at least a half dozen in the NFL, who have a decent amount of draft capital over the span of the next 2 seasons, and they would be willing to dump some of it to trade up. The reason why you wouldn't do it is because of how great the second overall pick has normally been. Now, over the last 20 years, you have had 13 Pro Bowlers that have come from the second overall pick. Over the last 20 years, you have had a Hall of Famer in Calvin Johnson. You have also had multiple all-decade teams with Julius Peppers, Ndamukong Suh, and Von Miller. So the likelihood of you getting a hit and getting someone who at least has been a one-time Pro Bowler from the second overall pick is high. Let's also remind you that outside of Zach Wilson, because he is a very young and very inexperienced at this point, so I'm going to count him out of it. But from 2016 to 2020, there was a Pro Bowl selection from the second overall pick in that 5-year span. Understand that 5 years in a row, if you had the second overall pick, that guy ended up being a Pro Bowler in the NFL. Similar to 2010, 2011, and 2012, where you had a Pro Bowl selection from all 3 of those guys who were selected second overall. So what you can conclude from the second overall pick is that the reason why you would do it is because of the amount of draft capital and the great compensation of picks you will get by trading it. The reason why you don't trade the second overall pick is because of how successful the second overall pick has been in their career. I also would love to keep in mind that there's been multiple Hall of Famers throughout the span of the NFL draft who have come from the second overall pick. You have had guys like Bob Brown, Tom Mack, Randy White, Tony Dorsett, LT, Lawrence Taylor, Eric Dickerson, Marshall Faulk, Calvin Johnson, to just name a few. So when you're drafting the second overall pick, I would say if you're the Detroit Lions, unless you get a home run offer, unless you get 5 solid picks, I would highly recommend you do not trade the second overall pick in this upcoming 2022 NFL draft. You stay put and you select the best defensive player in this draft, and honestly, someone I believe who would make the Detroit Lions better. So as we were talking about the Detroit Lions and if they should trade the second overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft, here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, it is time to get into the 2022 NFL mock draft. Now, this is going to be a segment that I'm going to be breaking down pick by pick by pick. And considering that the 2022 NFL draft is right around the corner, it is going to be in Las Vegas on April 28th. It is going to be at Allegiant Stadium. You're going to have hundreds of thousands of people watching on TV. You are going to have thousands of people on the Las Vegas Strip going to be attending this event. There's going to be a lot of business at the 2022 NFL draft. But here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media, there is going to be a lot of intrigue about what players go to where, what positions get drafted at what spot. So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to go in picks of 5. So in other words, we're going to go from 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, 21 to 25, 26 to 30, and then we're going to do the last 2. Now, understand that what we try to do here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio is we try to give you an angle. We try to give you a different perspective on the sports world. So how we're going to do this is that I'm going to announce the pick. I'm going to give you a brief reason as to why. And more importantly, I'm going to tell you why this team needs to make this move, why the team cannot pass up on this player. So let's start off with it. Let's get into the 2022 NFL mock draft here on Sports Angle and PR Connections Radio. Now, the first selection, Jacksonville Jaguars. This one has been obvious for the last couple of months. They will select defensive end Aiden Hutchinson from University of Michigan. The reason as to why is because of what he can provide to the Jacksonville Jaguars. You do not have Calais Campbell. You do not have Saxonville. The defense has been one of the worst in the NFL ever since Saxonville got torn apart. More importantly, when it comes to the Jacksonville Jaguars, they do not have a face of the defense in Jacksonville. They do not have a Jalen Ramsey. They do not have a Calais Campbell. They do not have a Malik Jackson. They do not have a superstar and someone who can sell season tickets on the defensive side of the ball. Last year, you drafted Trevor Lawrence. That's a start. But now you need to build up the defense. So I say Aiden Hutchinson goes first to the Jacksonville Jaguars here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. The second overall pick, the Detroit Lions, the team we talked about earlier in the segment on if they should trade this pick or if they should keep it. I'm going to say Detroit Lions and general manager Brad Holmes, they keep the selection and they draft the best defensive back in this NFL draft. They get Ahmad Gardner from University of Cincinnati. You have Jeff Okada. He has been a good defensive back. I mean, he's had some steady progress, but he needs a lot more to be accomplished. Drafted him top 5 overall last year. But when it comes to the Detroit Lions organization, you have Okuda, and then you're going to have Gardner. And considering that the NFC North, you have Adam Thielen, you have Justin Jefferson, there are some great wide receivers in the NFL world in that NFC North division. If you're Detroit Lions, you double down on defense, you get Ahmad Gardner, and you try to help that secondary. The next pick, the Houston Texans, they select offensive tackle Evan Neal from Alabama. Now, understand the Houston Texans, they have said and they have reported that they are going to stick with Davis Mills. It has been a very good and very confirmed that the Houston Texans want to build around Davis Mills. So if that's the case, if that is the situation, if they really believe in second-year quarterback Davis Mills, then they're going to pass on Malik Willis. They're going to pass on Kenny Pickett. They're going to pass on a quarterback. Well, you got to protect him. If you're going to pass on a quarterback, you got to be able to protect his blind side. You're going to be able to block for him. You have to get that meat wall in front of him. And a way to start that is to what you do best, and that is to draft a big boy, and that is an Evan Neal from University of Alabama, the best offensive tackle in this draft. Now, New York Jets, 4th overall, they need an offensive tackle as well. They need someone who is going to protect the O-line, and getting the guy from North Carolina State would be a solid pickup. They also said that they believe in Zach Wilson. They've been trying to build around him this offseason. Getting an offensive tackle to protect the guy you drafted last year at quarterback, that would be a start. 5th overall pick, the New York Giants. Getting the guy from Oregon makes a lot of sense when you understand the initiative that the New York Giants are going to do. Understand that the New York Giants, they have some building blocks on defense, but they do not have a premier pass rusher. They do not have their Michael Strahan out there in New Jersey. So if you have the Giants organization, they get a guy who at one point was considered the number 1 overall pick all these months ago. Getting him at 5 would be a steal for the New York Giants. So doing this 2022 NFL mock draft here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, we have Aiden Hutchinson going to Jacksonville. We have Ahmad Gardner going to Detroit. Evan Neal going to Houston. Akeem Ikwunu going to New York. And Kevon Trubadix going to the New York Giants. And then moving to the later end of the top 10 here in the 2022 NFL mock draft, you have the Carolina Panthers. Now, look, a lot of mock drafts having them taking a quarterback. A lot of mock drafts that believe that Matt Rule is going to go all in. He's going to go get a gunslinger. But who are you going to have to block for him? let's just be honest real quick. The Carolina Panthers have one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. It was ranked 30th in the league last year when it came to Pro Football Focus. Understand that if you draft a quarterback, that's fine. But if you're going to see him die on the field, what's the point? So I say the Carolina Panthers make the smart pick, and they make the right pick here. They get offensive tackle Charles Cross from Mississippi State. They go out and get a guy who will be able to block for a quarterback. And understand the Carolina Panthers are still not done trying to pursue another quarterback, so it makes a lot of sense that the Carolina Panthers end up getting an offensive tackle and then getting a quarterback in this upcoming offseason. Understand that Baker Mayfield's still around. There's still some good quarterbacks who are on the market. So, because of that being in mind, I say the Carolina Panthers, they select Charles Cross from Mississippi State. The New York Giants, they had the 7th overall pick, and after getting the defensive end from Oregon, they doubled down on defense. They do what is best for the New York Giants, and they get defensive back Derek Stingley Jr. from LSU. Now, I understand that his injury concerns is what made him slip in the NFL draft. I know it earlier in the year, he was a top 5 pick, hands down. But he has fallen back a bit, but he still has talent. Understand that Derek Stingley Jr. still has the production level and still has the talent to be a great defensive back in the NFL. So I'm going to say to you that when it comes to Derek Stingley Jr., the New York Giants, they'll take a risk on him. They'll take a flyer on the guy and draft him 7th overall and beef up their secondary out there in New Jersey. The 8th overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons. Once again, there's a lot of mock drafts who have them taking a quarterback here. But here's the thing about the Atlanta Falcons, something that a lot of people are forgetting. The next upcoming draft class is quarterback heavy. You have the quarterback from Ohio State. You have the quarterback from Alabama. The next year's draft class is going to be better than what this year's draft class is. So if you're the Atlanta Falcons and if you're the Carolina Panthers, would you be willing to not take a quarterback this year and get a quarterback in the more stacked and star-studded quarterback class of 2023? I'm going to say that the Atlanta Falcons are going to make the smart move here. They're going to make the right decision here. They're going to pass on a quarterback this year so they can be in the Bryce Young sweepstakes next year, but they get a wide receiver to have him catch passes to in next year. I say that wide receiver Garrett Wilson from Ohio State University, the best wide receiver in this draft, hands down. Garrett Wilson has been a phenomenal wide receiver throughout his collegiate career, and Garrett Wilson is a guy who would be able to be productive and be able to slot in right away from day one. So you have Garrett Wilson going to the Atlanta Falcons, wide receiver from Ohio State at 8. Also keep in mind that with Calvin Ridley being suspended for a full calendar year, they have to have a number 1 wide receiver for the upcoming season. Now the next selection, 9th overall in the 2022 NFL mock draft, here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I do have the first quarterback being taken in this draft class. I do have the first quarterback coming off the board, and I have Kenny Pickett from University of Pittsburgh going to the Seattle Seahawks, battling with Drew Lock for the starting job in 2022. Now, this one makes a lot of sense for 2 different reasons. 1, what the Seattle Seahawks need in this situation, and 2, what kind of system the Seattle Seahawks are going to have. Now, understand that Russell Wilson and the system that the Seattle Seahawks have had is more of a mobile system. Understand that Russell Wilson, with his feet and with the way that he is able to play the game, has been a reason for why it has been so productive, the reason why it's been so successful out there in Seattle. However, if you've seen Pete Carroll, and if you actually have examined what Pete Carroll has wanted as a quarterback in the NFL, he normally doesn't want a mobile quarterback. As a matter of fact, Pete Carroll in USC and before Russell Wilson showed up, used a pocket passer. He relied on a guy to stand in the pocket and have a big arm. And Kenny Pickett is the definition of that. He is not someone that is going to be running for his life like Russell Wilson did. Kenny Pickett is a guy who's going to stay in the pocket. He's going to be able to find reads. He's going to be able to develop down the field. So I'm saying that if you remember how Pete Carroll's system has been set up at USC and in his early years in Seattle before Russell Wilson showed up, I'm going to say to you that he'll revert back to that system and they will draft Kenny Pickett, a guy who is a more of a pocket passer, someone who's more than willing to stay in the pocket with an ability to run, and he'll be the quarterback of the future out there in Seattle. And then the last of our top 10, we have Trayvon Walker from University of Georgia. Go Bulldogs. I have them being selected with a 10th overall pick by the New York Jets. Now, this one I'm going to explain in simple terms. The New York Jets, I have them taking the offensive tackle from North Carolina State with the 4th overall pick. They're going to focus on the offensive line with that first selection because you have to protect Zach Wilson. You got to be able to open the running lanes for your running back. It makes a lot of sense on why you would choose the offense first instead of going for defense. However, the defensive line has been atrocious for the New York Jets. You honestly have not really had a great defensive tackle with the New York Jets since Leonard Williams, who ironically enough went to the New York Giants, who's right next door. The New York Jets are lacking a big man at the defensive tackle position. Quinnen Williams, that was a really unfortunate situation there. So if you're the New York Jets and you see Trayvon Walker on the board with the 10th overall pick, you jump at the opportunity and you get the best defensive tackle in this draft, and you get Trayvon Walker from Georgia to solidify your defensive line. So we have been 10 picks in here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio's 2022 NFL Mock Draft with your host, Ian Rickelli. Now, 11 to 15 is where you're going to see a lot of depth pieces, where you're going to see a lot of teams go after the non-essential positions. You're not going to see the quarterbacks. You're not going to really see the big defensive ends and defensive tackles that much. However, what you are going to see is guys who are going to be able to come in right away and help the team. So with the 11th overall pick, that will be the Washington Commanders. And yes, the Washington Commanders is still hard to pronounce. It'll keep on getting easier. And with the Washington Commanders, one of the biggest problems with them is that they are in an NFC East that is built on wide receivers. The Philadelphia Eagles, you got Devontae Smith. Dallas Cowboys, you have Michael Gallup, and you have CeeDee Lamb. And when it comes to the New York Giants, they did pay a lot of money for Kenny Galladay, and they did draft a first-round pick on Kadarius Toney not that long ago. So if you're the Washington Commanders, you need to really get a number one defensive back for your team. You really do need to go out and get someone who's going to be able to protect your defensive end. You're going to have to be able to protect against those secondaries. So when it comes to the 11th overall pick, Trent McDuffie from Washington, go Huskies, by the way, having a guy from Washington being selected by Washington, that's going to be perfect, and he'll be able to go up against your number one wide receivers out there in Washington. So I have Trent McDuffie from Washington going 11th overall to the Washington Commanders to build on the secondary and to help them out. The 12th overall pick, we go over to the NFC North. We talk about Jordan Davis from Georgia, go Bulldogs. And with the 12th overall pick, you understand the Minnesota Vikings, they don't really have that many holes. Understand that the Minnesota Vikings, they have veteran leadership in secondary. Those are going to be drafted later in the draft, but they do not need a first-round pick on the defensive backs. The linebacking core is solid and has been well protected, so they don't really need to draft one of them. However, the front four, there's been question marks there. You know, Danielle Hunter, he's been a solid guy for the Minnesota Vikings, but you need more than just one guy. Understand that the Minnesota Vikings, they really have not had a multiple guys on the defensive line out there in Minnesota. They need that again, and getting Jordan Davis would definitely solidify that in Minnesota. The Houston Texans, via the trade they made with the Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Watson, they have that second pick in the first round. And when it comes to Houston and their draft capital, they really need to make a hit on this one. Understand that the Houston Texans, more importantly, need to make sure that both of their selections end up being hits. So, being similar to a New York Jets model, I had the Houston Texans selecting the best offensive tackle in this draft with their first pick. Now, the second pick is where they're going to focus on defense. And I'm going to consider this their J.J. Watt replacement pick. The guy that is going to replace their best defensive guy on the defensive end. Understand that Jermaine Johnson II, there is still going to be some question marks there when it comes to his game. But when you draft him into the NFL, he can develop. He can become a good pass rusher in the NFL. So Jermaine Johnson is a project, but I think the Houston Texans would be willing to take on that project, just like they did have a project a couple of years ago. Now, the 14th pick, the Baltimore Ravens, it is a big question mark with them. Understand that the Baltimore Ravens, they have their running back situation. Their quarterback is secure. Tight end is one of the best in the NFL. Offensive line, for the most part, is pretty good. And their defense has been an organization that they have been building on, and they've been building that defense over this past off season or two. So when you look at the Baltimore Ravens, there really is only one big glaring need out there in Baltimore, and that is their wide receivers. Understand that the Baltimore Ravens organization does not have a definitive number one wide receiver in the NFL. Understand that the Baltimore Ravens have a bunch of moving parts, but they do not have a guy that you could say is a deep threat and someone who Lamar Jackson can put the ball up and trust to go get it. Drake London from USC would be that guy. Drake London, if you've been watching any of his highlights or if you've watched any Pac-12 games like I have, you will know how big of a force Drake London is on the game. You'll better understand that when Drake London is on the field, you have to watch out for him. So, because the Baltimore Ravens need a guy like that on the wide receiver end, and Lamar Jackson most definitely needs to get a wide receiver with that type of mentality and that type of talent, I say that Drake London, Baltimore Ravens, he goes 14th overall. And then the 15th overall pick, I'm a little excited for this one, and shout out to one of the people I know from the Ignorant Thinker podcast, Dennis Holmes out there in Philly. Now, Devin Lloyd from University of Utah. I am a fan of University of Utah for anybody who does know your host, Ian Rickelli. So, watching Devin Lloyd develop as a linebacker in college football, I say he is one of the best linebackers in college football, and I've always said that I think he is going to be an upcoming future first-round pick in the NFL. So the fact that he is a future first-round pick and a guy that's going to be extremely talented in the NFL, it just tells me that I was right about Devin Lloyd when I was watching him at University of Utah. And the Philadelphia Eagles, however, they need linebacker help. Understand that the Philadelphia Eagles have done a lot on the offensive side, and the Philadelphia Eagles have definitely made a lot of key acquisitions when it came to defensive back and secondary. But what the Philadelphia Eagles still need to figure out is get a linebacker who is going to be able to help them on their front seven. So I have Devin Lloyd from University of Utah going to the Philadelphia Eagles with the 15th overall pick in the 2022 NFL mock draft here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. Now, as we've been talking about the NFL Draft 2022 here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the 16th overall pick and the 19th overall pick, you honestly could flip them if you wanted to. They're both the same team. However, I say the offense is the most important aspect of the New Orleans Saints system. Understand that New Orleans Saints are going to be fine on defense, but it's their offense that is going to let them down this season. Understand that their offense is going to be make or break for the New Orleans Saints. So I have them taking an offensive lineman first, and then focusing on quarterback. But honestly, you could go either way. You could have quarterback at 16, then offensive lineman at 19. But having Bernard Raymond from Central Michigan University, he is a solid offensive tackle, and he is somebody that's going to be able to produce right away with the New Orleans Saints organization. Also, keep in mind that Terrion Armstead is with the Miami Dolphins. He's no longer with the New Orleans Saints. And really, since the Max Unger trade, you have really not had a great, definitive guy out there in New Orleans. I mean, you had maybe Ryan Ramczyk, but even that's a stretch to say. So them getting an offensive tackle to protect the offensive line and to build up the offensive line makes a lot of sense in New Orleans. Now, Malik Willis from Liberty, I have him going to New Orleans Saints with the 19th selection, and here's my explanation as to why. The New Orleans Saints, they re-signed Jameis Winston. But Jameis Winston is no longer the first overall pick with all the hype and all of the belief around him that he was 7 years ago. I understand that when Jameis Winston entered the league in Tampa Bay, he was considered the next best thing. He was going to be a great quarterback, but he hasn't lived up to that. Jameis Winston has shown flashes, absolutely. But Jameis Winston is not a face of the franchise. Jameis Winston is not Drew Brees. And the New Orleans Saints are looking for their next Drew Brees. As cruel and as mad and as cold as it's going to say, that is the reality with the New Orleans Saints organization. They're looking for their next franchise quarterback. They're looking for their next superstar in the 2022 NFL season. And when it comes to Michael Thomas, he's on his way out. Alvin Kamara, with his situation in Las Vegas, that's going to be crucial. So if you're the New Orleans Saints, you have to get a quarterback in this draft. You have to either in round 1 or in round 2, because there's going to be a good amount of quarterbacks taken in round 2 as well. Understand that getting a quarterback is essential for New Orleans. And I say with the first round, with their second pick, not their first, they get Malik Willis, quarterback from Liberty, to replace Jameis Winston down the line. Now, the Los Angeles Chargers getting wide receiver Chris Olave from Ohio State University. I'm not going to spend this much time on it, but I will say this. When it comes to the Los Angeles Chargers, getting more weapons for Justin Herbert would not be a bad thing. The Philadelphia Eagles, 18th overall pick, gained Devontae Wyatt from University of Georgia. Understand that the Philadelphia Eagles need to draft defense. Like I said, their offense has been pretty well built the last couple of years. Their defense has been their problem. So getting a defensive tackle, getting somebody who'll be able to step in and be able to protect and get to the quarterback, that is going to be a very important thing for the Philadelphia Eagles. So after getting Devin Lloyd 15th overall at linebacker, getting a defensive tackle at 18 makes a lot of sense. And with the 20th selection, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, keep in mind, unfortunately just saw Dwayne Haskins passed away. Very unfortunate, and I will say rest in peace to him and prayers to his family. When it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, they need defensive back help. And I mean badly, they need defensive back help. Now, I understand that the Pittsburgh Steelers, they could go for a quarterback here. And I understand that there have been mock drafts who have had Pittsburgh getting a quarterback. But they signed Mitchell Trubisky to a multi-year deal. And if they really needed to get a quarterback, they could realistically get one later in the draft. Once again, in the second round, you have Sam Howell. You're going to have Carson Strong from Nevada. You're going to have quarterbacks that are going to be taken later in day 2. So if the Pittsburgh Steelers play their cards right, they go after a definitive need and they get a good defensive back in this draft, and then they get a quarterback later in the draft. So as we're doing the 2022 NFL mock draft here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, we have done 20 so far, and before we get into the later end of the first round, I'm going to not only repeat, but I'm going to show you who I have already being taken. So the Jacksonville Jaguars will take Aiden Hutchinson from University of Michigan. Detroit Lions will take Ahmad Gardner from Cincinnati. Houston Texans will take offensive tackle Evan Neal from Alabama. New York Jets will take Akeem Ikwonu from North Carolina State. The New York Giants will take Kevon Trubisky from Oregon. The Carolina Panthers will take offensive tackle Charles Cross from Mississippi State. New York Giants will take Derek Stingley Jr. from LSU. Garrett Wilson will go to the Atlanta Falcons at 8. Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh, the first quarterback off the board, will go to Seattle at 9. Trayvon Walker from Georgia will go to the New York Jets at 10. The 11th pick, the Washington Commanders will take Washington Huskies defensive back Trent McDuffie. Minnesota Vikings will take defensive tackle Jordan Davis from Georgia. Houston Texans, with their second pick in the draft, will take Jermaine Johnson from Florida State University. Baltimore Ravens will take one of the best wide receivers in the draft with Drake London from USC. And Philadelphia Eagles will take linebacker Devin Lloyd from University of Utah. The New Orleans Saints will take Bernard Raymond from Central Michigan. Los Angeles Chargers will take wide receiver Chris Oley from Ohio State University. Philadelphia Eagles with the 18th pick will take Devontae Wyatt from Georgia. Malik Willis will go 19 to New Orleans Saints. And Kaiir Elam from Florida will go to the Pittsburgh Steelers at 20. Now, the New England Patriots are a weird team. And now, I'm not just saying this because Bill Belichick is known for trading down in every single NFL draft humanly imaginable. But when it comes to Bill Belichick, you never know what he's going to do. You never know if Bill Belichick is going to go out and he's going to draft a guy who's supposed to go in the 3rd round, but draft him in the 1st. You don't know if a guy like Bill Belichick will intentionally go and get a quarterback just because he can. However, Bill Belichick needs a wide receiver. It has been well established that the New England Patriots do not have a number 1 wide receiver right now. The New England Patriots do not have their Stephon Diggs. The New England Patriots do not have their Tyreek Hill. And they do not have a Corey Davis. All of those wide receivers are guys that I mentioned in their own division. The New England Patriots have N'Keal Harry. Well, congratulations to you. But you do not have a great wide receiver in the NFL right now. So when it comes to the New England Patriots, they're going to be taking a flyer on this one, and this will definitely be controversial. But getting the wide receiver who got injured in the national championship game is definitely a question mark. However, I think Bill Belichick would be able to do it. And more importantly, I think Bill Belichick would have the balls to do it. Because understand that if he can get a guy who has an injury later in the draft and then develop them into a great player later down the line, all it tells me is that they will be willing to do whatever it takes to develop this guy, and that is great for the New England Patriots. So, Jameson Williams, wide receiver from Alabama, he will go to 21st overall. Those Green Bay Packers, and those great Green Bay Packers teams, they will go 22nd overall thanks to the Davante Adams trade. And when it comes to the Green Bay Packers, it is clear and obvious what they need. Everybody who has watched the Green Bay Packers this offseason knows what they need to get: a wide receiver. Understand the Green Bay Packers organization has to absolutely 1,000% get a number 1 wide receiver from this draft class. Now, there is a possibility that they will take their 2 first-round picks and trade up to get a guy like Garrett Wilson, who is the best wide receiver in this draft. But if they're going to stay with the 22nd overall pick, I say that they will get Treylon Burks from University of Arkansas. I like his potential, and I like what he can do as a wide receiver. So Green Bay Packers will get him at 22. Now, the biggest surprise from the 2022 NFL Draft is with the Arizona Cardinals. Understand that Kyle Hamilton at one point was considered a top 5 pick. However, his 40 time and his private workouts have actually been making him go down on draft boards. Understand that Kyle Hamilton's stock leading into the 2022 NFL Draft has been going down and down and down as weeks have been coming forward. So I say the Arizona Cardinals will get a sleeper and will get a surprise in the 2022 NFL Draft. The Arizona Cardinals to team up with Budda Baker, they will get Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame at the 23rd overall pick. I say the Arizona Cardinals will make a splash and will end up getting probably a guy who should be taken top 5, but they'll get him at 23. The 24th pick, the Dallas Cowboys, they will get a great selection and a great addition to Micah Parsons, and that is Nakobe Dean from Georgia. I mean, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, Washington Commanders, and New Jersey Giants, you do not want to see Nakobe Dean, and you do not want to see Micah Parsons on the same defensive line. However, that could be a very good possibility for the Dallas Cowboys if they get Nakobe Dean at 24. And then the Buffalo Bills, shout out to the 716 for this. When it comes to the Buffalo Bills, resigning Stephon Diggs ensures they're not going to draft a wide receiver. Them needing an offensive tackle, though, is very important. Understand that getting an offensive tackle and getting somebody who can make sure that Josh Allen isn't running for his life is essential. Getting an offensive tackle to be able to help Zach Moss and Devin Singletary would be an addition in Buffalo. And if they're going to win a Super Bowl, like I think they have the ability to, getting an offensive tackle is essential. So, offensive tackle Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa would be a little bit of a reach, but I think it's necessary. Getting an offensive tackle who's going to be able to do his job is what they need in Buffalo. So, I say 25th overall, the Buffalo Bills select Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa at 25th overall. Now, moving down to the later section of the 2022 NFL mock draft, this is where you see a lot of depth because these teams went far into the playoffs. Understand that these teams was almost this close to getting to the Super Bowl, and they're going to want to add onto those organizations. So the Tennessee Titans, well, they got to make sure that Derrick Henry is fed. They got to make sure that Derrick Henry is given the rock 400 times a season. Getting an offensive tackle to replace Jack Conklin to replace the guys they have lost is vital. Getting offensive tackle Zion Johnson from Boston College. He's a big guy, explosive guy. If you're Tennessee Titans, if you want to protect Derrick Henry, you're going to do that. You need to get Zion Johnson. And with the 27th pick, Kenyon Green, offensive tackle from Texas A&M. Tom Brady's coming back, and an offensive line is vital for Tom Brady. Understand the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when they won that Super Bowl, their offensive line had a lot to do with it. And the fact that two of their offensive linemen eventually left the last couple of off seasons, that tells me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers need to draft an offensive lineman and bring in a big guy to protect Tom Brady. So Kenyon Green, Texas A&M, will go 27th overall. The Green Bay Packers getting a wide receiver. This is pretty much a no-duh obvious pick. So Jahan Dotson from Penn State, he will go to Green Bay at 28. And the Kansas City Chiefs definitively getting their great defensive backs and building up their secondary is what they need to do here. Getting Daxton Hill from Michigan and getting Andrew Booth from Clemson will be able to patch those holes on the secondary and will be able to help that situation out there in Kansas City. So Andrew Booth from Clemson, Daxton Hill from Michigan, they will go to Kansas City and they will help build the defense in Kansas City. And then lastly, before we get to the last pick, because I left that on purpose, Cincinnati Bengals, they will select center Tyler Lindbaum from Iowa. Understand that the Cincinnati Bengals, their offensive line is the reason why they lost that Super Bowl. Understand that Joe Burrow, if he would have had maybe 1.5 more seconds in that Super Bowl, he would have seen that Jamar Chase was wide open. Understand that offensive line letting up 8 sacks in a single postseason, in a single playoff game, that cannot happen again. So the Cincinnati Bengals will get a great offensive lineman, get Tyler Lindenbaum from Iowa, go Hawkeyes, and they will be the 31st overall pick. And then the last pick in the NFL draft. The last selection in the first round, the Detroit Lions have this pick, and I left this on purpose because I say the Detroit Lions will select Desmond Ridder, the quarterback from Cincinnati, to be their replacement for Jared Goff. Now, understand that Brad Holmes, the general manager of the Detroit Lions, he did say that he wasn't drafting a quarterback with the second overall pick. However, he didn't say that he was not going to draft a quarterback at all in the 2022 NFL draft. So understanding context and understand that when it comes to the NFL draft, I understand that there are going to be people out there that are going to be looking at the Detroit Lions and they're going to ask themselves the question, who are they going to take in day 2? Well, my argument's going to be they're not going to take a quarterback in day 2. They're going to take a quarterback at the end of day 1, and they're going to get Desmond Ridder. So I will go through the draft order one more time here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, and I will say that this will be a great NFL draft here in Las Vegas, the sports entertainment capital of the world, April 28th through April 30th at Allegiant Stadium here in Las Vegas. You're going to have Aiden Hutchinson going to Jacksonville Jaguars from Michigan. Ahmad Gardner will go to Detroit from University of Cincinnati. Evan Neal from Alabama will go to the Houston Texans. Akeem Ikewunu will go to the North Carolina State University, will go to the New York Jets. Kevon Thibodeaux, he will go to the New York Giants from University of Oregon. Charles Cross from Mississippi State will go to the Carolina Panthers at 6. Derek Stingley Jr., the defensive back from LSU, will go to the New York Giants at 7. The Atlanta Falcons will get their wide receiver of the future, wide receiver Garrett Wilson from Ohio State University. The first quarterback in this draft to go off the board, Kenny Pickett from Pittsburgh. He will go 9 to Seattle. And the New York Jets will go with defensive tackle Trayvon Walker from Georgia. Trent McDuffie from Washington will go to the Washington Commanders at 11. Minnesota Vikings will solidify their defensive line, get defensive tackle Jordan Davis from Georgia. Houston Texans will get defensive end Jermaine Johnson from Florida State University. Baltimore Ravens will get a wide receiver for Lamar Jackson in Drake London from USC. And the Philadelphia Eagles will solidify their linebacking core with Devin Lloyd from University of Utah. Bernard Raymond from Central Michigan will go to New Orleans at 16. LA Chargers will get wide receiver Chris Oley from Ohio State University. 18th, Devontae Wyatt from Philadelphia Eagles will go from University of Georgia at 18. Malik Willis from Liberty will go to New Orleans at 19 to be the eventual replacement for Jameis Winston. And Kyer Elam from Florida will go to the Pittsburgh Steelers at 20. And then at 21, Jameson Williams, the wide receiver from Alabama, will go to New England. Green Bay will get their wide receiver in Treylon Burks from Arkansas. Kyle Hamilton, the sleeper and the fall of the draft, will go to Arizona at 23. Nakobe Dean from Georgia will go to Dallas to team up with Micah Parsons at 24. And Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa will protect Josh Allen at 25. At 26, Zion Johnson from Boston College will protect Derrick Henry at 26. Kenyon Green will protect Tom Brady at 27. Aaron Rodgers will get a wide receiver and Dotson from Penn State at 28. Kansas City will solidify their secondary with Hill and with Booth in back-to-back picks. Cincinnati will protect Joe Burrow with Lindenbaum from Iowa at 31. And then the Detroit Lions will get Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati at 32 to be their quarterback. Now, I want to know from all the people watching around the world, do you agree or do you disagree with these selections? And if you have a favorite team, let me know who you want them to select down below. Now, I also want to say shout out to all the people watching on Facebook, YouTube, and all the platforms we share this show to. We highly appreciate your support. And we also recommend you go to the prconnectionsradio.com. You can see all the content they have on there. You can watch all the shows from the Sports Angle on prconnectionsradio.com. And I will say that they have a lot of great content like We Got the Power, and you have Defenders of Finance with Big Tex. So I highly recommend all the people watching right now to watch all the other content on prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. And lastly, before we get into the NHL to start the second hour, I do have one final segment on the NFL. Now, the starting quarterbacks is a hot topic. We have seen 9 starting quarterbacks switch places this offseason. Understand that we have seen Marcus Mariota go from the Las Vegas Raiders to the Atlanta Falcons. We have seen the Cleveland Browns acquire Deshaun Watson. We have seen the Denver Broncos getting Russell Wilson. We have seen the Houston Texans getting Davis Mills now as their full-time starting quarterback. Matt Ryan, he went to the Indianapolis Colts. And we've also noticed that you also had the New Orleans Saints bringing back Jameis Winston, and you had the Pittsburgh Steelers with the retirement of Ben Roethlisberger bringing in Mitchell Trubisky. However, there are 2 teams left that need a quarterback. There are 2 teams that desperately need to fill that void, and I will let you know who I think it's going to be. Now, the first team that I think could get a quarterback for the remainder of this offseason, the first organization that I think is a possibility of still getting a franchise quarterback already is the Carolina Panthers. Understand the Carolina Panthers, you have Cam Newton, you have Sam Darnold, that's fine and dandy, but what the Carolina Panthers need desperately is a quarterback who's going to be there for all 17 games. Understand the Carolina Panthers cannot do the quarterback carousel and cannot do ring around the rosies like they did last year. Understand that you cannot play hot potato with the quarterback position. It simply does not work. Okay, this isn't college football where you can have one quarterback in for the first half and one quarterback in for the second half. It just doesn't work. If you are the Carolina Panthers, you do need to get a quarterback, and I actually think I might know a great quarterback for them. I actually am going to say that the Carolina Panthers need to call up the Cleveland Browns and get Baker Mayfield. Understand the Carolina Panthers getting Baker Mayfield would make them better as a result. Understand that Christian McCaffrey, he's already going to be there. He's already an established guy. Wide receiver-wise, they already have some very good wide receivers on that organization, and the offensive tackle will be added heavily in the NFL draft. So, here's what I'm going to say. I say that you are the Cleveland Browns. If the Carolina Panthers say we'll give you a 3rd-round pick for Baker Mayfield, I think that'd be a great idea. I say that if you are the Carolina Panthers and you offer a 3rd-rounder or maybe a 5th-rounder for Baker Mayfield, you are going to be getting production value from Baker Mayfield. You are going to be getting a solid quarterback who took the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs not even 18 months ago. So, when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, I say they're the first team that could get a quarterback this offseason that hasn't gotten one already, and they get Baker Mayfield from the Cleveland Browns. And then the last team that could use a quarterback still, the last team that I really believe does need to get a quarterback, man, this one's going to be controversial. This one is going to get a lot of hate towards the end because we're getting towards the end of the first hour. But if there's an organization that really needs to get a quarterback, really needs to establish a quarterback, I'm going to say that this organization is the Miami Dolphins. Understand that the Miami Dolphins organization, they don't have a quarterback. They do not have a quarterback that they can say in full confidence will get the ball to Jalen Waddle. They do not have a quarterback that in full confidence will get to Tyreek Hill, that will get to Mike Gesicki. If you're the Miami Dolphins, you drafted Tua Tagovailoa, and understand that when it comes to Tua, how much more does that leash have to be put on him? How many more of an opportunity do you have to give Tua before you pull the plug? Understand that the Miami Dolphins have a good defense. The Miami Dolphins have built their offense this offseason. Are you willing to give Tua one last opportunity, or are you willing to trade him to get a established quarterback back? Because here's my argument and here's my angle. I say the Miami Dolphins call up the Minnesota Vikings and get Kirk Cousins. I say that the Minnesota Vikings, they already have Kellen Mond. You have a young quarterback. It's a possibility they might even draft another one in the NFL draft already this year. When it comes to Minnesota, this is an organization that has been paying Kirk Cousins for a couple of years, and Kirk Cousins is a definition of, I'm not going to turn the ball over that much. I'm not going to make the costly opportunities. All you need me to do is win you X amount of games and get you a certain amount of passing yards. Understand that this is a Kirk Cousins who, by the way, is signed for a $35 million deal for 1 year. Understand that Kirk Cousins could be a one and done with Miami if they did trade for him. So I say if you're the Miami Dolphins, you call up the Minnesota Vikings, you get Kirk Cousins, and you have him pass to Tyreek Hill. You have Kirk Cousins pass to Jalen Waddle. You have Kirk Cousins throw to Mike Gesicki. Understand that the Minnesota Vikings, they are not going to be a playoff team this year. Understand the Minnesota Vikings are most likely not going to be a contending team. They're going to be an average organization. So taking a chance on Tua and trading Kirk Cousins and his expensive $35 million contract would make sense for the Minnesota Vikings because of the fact that the Minnesota Vikings would be moving on from a $35 million contract, and the Miami Dolphins would be getting a 34-year-old quarterback who's been in the league for a good amount of years and knows how to be with established wide receivers. So as we were talking about the NFL here on the Sports Angle, I'm your host, Rocco Raquelli. And understand that when it comes to Ian Raquelli and my Twitter handle at Ian Raquelli18, understand that when it comes to the NFL, it's been a lot of fun to talk about. We talked about the Detroit Lions, that they can trade the second overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft. We did the entire 2022 NFL mock draft here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, voice of new media. And now the NHL will come calling, but we need to do something a little different. Here on the Sports Angle, we have not really talked about the NBA as much. Now, I understand the NBA is the second most popular sport in the world. The playoffs have already been established, and when it comes to the NBA playoffs, there's going to be a lot of intrigue there. However, there is one team I really want to focus on. There is one team I think can make a serious push and make a lot of noise in the NBA playoffs, and that is the Memphis Grizzlies. Understand that the Memphis Grizzlies organization has been on a tear as of late. Understand, this is a Memphis Grizzlies team that not that long ago was on a 5-game win streak, and they beat the best of the best in the NBA. Understand, this is a Memphis Grizzlies team who won 7 out of 8 games in the end of March. This is an organization that has been deadly. Understand, this is a Memphis Grizzlies team that beat Brooklyn, beat Milwaukee, beat Golden State, and beat Phoenix already this year. Understand that Memphis is a second seed in the Western Conference by no accident. That has been for a reason. Understand that John Morant, even when he is not on the court, the Memphis Grizzlies are balling. Understand that even when John Morant is injured and not able to compete, the Memphis Grizzlies go on without him and they continue to win. Understand that the Memphis Grizzlies in the first round are most likely going to go up against Minnesota. That is going to be a great series to watch. Understand that the next round, if they go up against Golden State, go up against Denver, they've already beaten them before. You could make a realistic argument that Memphis will go to the Western Conference Finals, and I don't think a lot of people are going to look at you crazy. Understand that the Memphis Grizzlies organization, who has gone 36-16 in conference play, they are dangerous this year. Understand that the Memphis Grizzlies could be the most underrated team in the NBA this year, and it's not even close. I mean, just take it the recent game they had against New Orleans. Understand that this is a team that, once again, John Morant did not lead the team in points. That was Dylan Brooks. Understand, this is a Memphis Grizzlies team that uses a 12-man rotation to their advantage. Not only do they have big men in Jaren Jackson Jr. and Steven Adams, who both bring up valuable minutes for the team, but they also have a veteran in Kyle Anderson. They have veterans in DeAnthony Milton, and they have young guys coming off the bench in Desmond Bane and Brandon Clark and Xavier Tillman. Now, yes, you do have the face of the franchise in John Morant, and I don't give him any discredit. He is one of the top 5 players in the NBA right now. But when it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies, the fact that they had in the most recent game 11 players score at least 1 point during the game, that tells you how versatile and really shows you how diverse the Memphis Grizzlies organization is when it comes to scoring, how they pass the ball around, how they spread out the floor out there in Memphis. So my angle here for the first of our topics here in the NBA, getting into the NBA playoffs, the Memphis Grizzlies are not only going to make the Western Conference Finals, the Memphis Grizzlies are the most underrated team in the NBA right now. The Memphis Grizzlies are the most underappreciated and the most least respected team in the NBA in 2022. The fact that they have a better record than Golden State, better record than Denver, better record than Dallas, and better record than the teams in LA should really show you how well balanced and how well built that team was through the draft and through key acquisitions in the offseason. Now, I'm going to say when it comes to Memphis, not only have they been really impressive, but the Memphis Grizzlies have been doing it through injuries, which is also a key situation. Now, I want to ask all the people who are watching around the world and all the people who really do watch the NBA, when it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies, could them being a smaller market team set them back in the NBA playoffs? Could them being a smaller market team cost them in the Western Conference Finals if they go up against a San Francisco out there in Golden State? If the Memphis Grizzlies go up against a Phoenix, which is a bigger market than them, would that affect them in terms of winning the series? Now, I understand that when it comes to that situation, there's going to be a lot of situations. And I'm going to say when it comes to Memphis, I'm definitely going to watch them. I'm going to be very interested in them. And when it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies, I will really want to see them make the Western Conference Finals, and I would not be upset if they did make it to the NBA Finals. So now we're talking about the NBA here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I am your host, Ian Rickelli. Continuing with our NBA conversation, there is a topic that I think really does need to be discussed, and I'm actually going to bring it up right now because the NBA refuses to talk about it. This is an NBA that for some reason doesn't want to mention the fact that the Phoenix Suns are among the odds-on favorite to win the NBA Finals. Now, if you go to the sports books, and I'm going to give a shout-out to the DraftKings, by the way. They're who I go to for all of my odds. When it comes to the NBA odds, and when it comes to VegasInsider.com and DraftKings, the future odds are alarming. Now, understand the Phoenix Suns right now have a plus 260 to win the NBA Finals. Understand that the Phoenix Suns organization are better than Milwaukee in terms of the odds. They're better than Brooklyn, according to odds makers. And they're better than Golden State, according to odds makers. Understand that when it comes to the Phoenix Suns organization, them being ranked so high, you could look at it from one or two ways. You could look at it from a odds maker's perspective, and you could look at it from a bettor's perspective. Now, the odds maker's perspective for the Phoenix Suns, So the reason why they are the odds-on favorite is because they have the best record in the league. They are the odds-on favorite because of the fact that they have been the best of the best all year round. And when it comes to the Phoenix Suns, they have a well-built roster. They went to the NBA Finals last year, and they already have the experience of an NBA Finals. Now, another reason why odds makers could definitely be going to Phoenix is because they have Devin Booker, they have DeAndre Ayton, they have Chris Paul, they have the talent to do it, and they believe that they're going to get it done. Now, what I will point out, however, what I will say is that when it comes to the Phoenix Suns organization, the one reason why bettors could be going for them is because of the fact that in the Western Conference, you do not have an LA. You do not have a dominant Golden State like you've seen in past years. You do not have a Greg Popovich dominating the league in San Antonio. This is the first time in a long time that the big three in the West are not dominating the league. And because of that, that might be a reason for why Phoenix is so high. Now, my angle on this when it comes to the Phoenix Suns organization is that the reason why they should be an odds-on favorite and the reason why I think they could go to the NBA Finals is because their roster has been well built, their coach is well established, and their general manager has done a fantastic job of doing his job the right way. Now we're talking about the NBA here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. And when it comes to the NBA, let me ask a simple question. If you had to start a franchise with any player in the league, who would it be and why? Who would be the NBA player that if you had to have the first overall pick, this is a fantasy draft, fantasy basketball draft, first player, you're up on the podium, and you get to select anybody in the NBA. Who is it going to be and why? Now, there is guys like Trae Young. There's guys like Kyrie. There's guys like Ben Simmons. There are some solid players, but you wouldn't take them first overall. You have well-established veterans like Kevin Durant and LeBron James. But would you take them first overall if you were starting a franchise from scratch? If you were starting a franchise right now, would you take the guys who have already been in the league for a decade? Guys who are already in their 30s, same with James Harden? Or would you go with a young established face? If you were an expansion team and you could take any NBA player off of any roster, would you not take a young, up-and-coming, fresh-faced point guard who's going to dominate the league for the next decade? If you were a general manager for the Las Vegas Stallions, if you were a general manager for the San Diego Cyclones, who would you take? Now, to me, there's really only 4 realistic options here. There is really only 4 answers that you could give. One of them is for the money. One of them is for the talent. One of them is for the prestige. And one of them is for the legacy. Now, let's get the legacy one out of the way because that one is going to be pretty obvious. The guy that would bring in the legacy would be LeBron James. If you draft LeBron James first overall, you're doing it because of the legacy that LeBron James has. You would draft LeBron James first overall because of the amount of legacy that LeBron James has established. Because make no mistake about it, throughout his whole career, he has been the best NBA player who is active right now. There's really nobody else resume-wise who has been the best player in the NBA out of all the active players still. So I do agree, and I will say that if you did pick LeBron James, that would be the legacy pick. Now, if you look at the money perspective, If you were gonna draft somebody first overall who was gonna bring in the season tickets, if you were gonna draft a guy first overall, if you were creating a franchise in the NBA and you had to make a lot of money pretty quickly, you getting a guy like Kevin Durant would make a lot of sense because of how much money and because of how many season tickets you would make off of drafting Kevin Durant. Of having Kevin Durant be the face of your franchise, that would be a money-making machine in the NBA. So if you're starting a franchise in the NBA, you could go with the legacy of LeBron James. You could go with the amount of money you'll make with Kevin Durant. Now, if you want to go off of the talent, then that would be Steph Curry. I mean, Steph Curry has been one of the most talented players that has changed the game for a long time. Understand that when it comes to Steph Curry, not only has he changed the game, but Steph Curry has also made a lot of changes for the sport itself. And his amount of talent has been a reason why he's won multiple championships and to why the Golden State Warriors have been as relevant as they are. But then there's the last reason. And the last reason as to why you would draft this player, and the last reason for why you should draft this player first overall, is because this guy has a peak that he hasn't even hit yet. This guy hasn't even entered his prime, and he's already putting up record numbers. And my angle here on Sports Angle and PR Connections Radio is that this would be my actual first pick. Like, if you had me select with a first overall pick, if I actually had to pick somebody, I'm picking this guy. And with that first selection, I am taking Ja Morant from the Memphis Grizzlies. He has the size, he has the strength, he has the speed, he has the dunking ability, he has the charisma, he has the money factor because he could bring in season tickets. He's going to be building up his legacy. He has a lot of talent. And understand that when it comes to Ja Morant, he has done more in 3 seasons than a lot of players have done in their entire decade with one team. Understand that Ja Morant has brought the Memphis Grizzlies from being a mid-contender to being one of the best teams in the West. Understand that the Memphis Grizzlies have gone from an organization who was respectable and gritty to a team that's fun, a team that you want to turn on the TV and watch. And Ja Morant is the reason why. So understand that when it comes to Ja Morant, he would be my first pick because he will bring in the money, he'll be a box office attraction, and when it comes to Ja Morant, he has the talent and he will have the longevity to build his own legacy for your franchise. So, to repeat the question, if you had a first pick in the NBA draft and you could pick any active player, who would it be and why? My answer is Ja Morant. And then getting into our last topic here on the NBA conversation, and it is who should be Coach of the Year in the NBA? Who should be the guy that you say is Coach of the Year and should be nominated as the guy who has done the most this season when it comes to coaching? Now, there's a good amount of candidates you could do for this. Understand that when it comes to Coach of the Year, there is a lot of great selections you could do. Understand that when it comes to the standings, you could look at the Phoenix Suns, and you could look at Monty Williams and say he's done pretty well. You could go over to the Eastern Conference, and you could say Eric Spoelstra could be a solid pick. Maybe, just maybe, go over to the Milwaukee Bucks and have Mike Budenholzer be the selection yet again. Or maybe you go with a first-time guy. Maybe, just maybe, you have Taylor Jenkins from the Memphis Grizzlies be Coach of the Year. Understand that Taylor Jenkins, one of the youngest coaches in the NBA, is somebody who has had to earn his opportunity. This is a guy who was an assistant with Mike Budenholzer, and then he went over to Memphis, and he has established his own way. Understand that when it comes to Taylor Jenkins, he is a player's coach. He is a guy who benefits, and he is somebody who motivates players in the NBA. And when it comes to the NBA, sometimes that's all you need as a coach. So I'm going to say to you that if I had to make my pick for NBA Coach of the Year, I'm going to go with Taylor Jenkins from the Memphis Grizzlies because of what he has done for Memphis. I mean, understand that last year, they went from a barely above 500 record to now having the second best record in the Western Conference. If that doesn't tell you how great he has been for Memphis, I think that really shows you what all you need to know about him. And once again, if you want to comment down below, or if you want to go into the chat and tell people and tell me at Ian Rakelli 18 who you think should be Coach of the Year, I'm all ears. Now, when it comes to the NHL, because understand that the NHL is also a topic that I really wanted to discuss. And when it comes to the NHL world, we have been seeing tonight, and we have been seeing for majority of the NHL, the tough battle for the 8th seed in the Western Conference. Now, the Dallas Stars, they have been losing games recently. In fact, the Dallas Stars have actually lost back-to-back games against Toronto and against New Jersey on their East Coast road trip. The Vegas Golden Knights, they have picked up some momentum, but had an unfortunate loss to Vancouver. Vancouver has won back-to-back games. They're trying to stay in the hunt. And when it comes to the Winnipeg Jets, they are not officially eliminated yet, but losing 4 straight doesn't help their case. So Dallas with 84 points is in 8th place. The Vegas Golden Knights are tied with them with 84 points. Understand the Vancouver Canucks are at 78 points. This is an organization who, once again, they are 6 points back. They're not officially eliminated yet, but this is an organization who, if they are back by 4 points, it's going to be tough for them to get in without somebody losing ahead of them. Now, the Nashville Predators at 86 points, there's a possibility there. They have lost recently. The Nashville Predators have had some form of losing momentum over the last couple of weeks. So, looking at the remaining schedule of the Dallas Stars, they have 11 games left in the year. You go up against Chicago, that should be easy for them, but they've lost to New Jersey recently, so I don't know if you could consider it easy. You have Tampa Bay and Minnesota back-to-back. Those are 2 playoff teams. They're battling for seeding right now. They're not going to want to lose that game. You're going up against San Jose. That should be easy, but yet again, they lost recently, so I don't know if that would be considered easy. You have Vancouver and you have Edmonton, and those are going to be 2 teams that are battling for a playoff spot. They are not going to want to lose that game. Calgary, they're trying to win the Pacific Division. They cannot afford to lose. They're going to go up against Seattle. Should be easy. Go up against Anaheim. Should be easy. Go up against Arizona. Should be easy. But when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights and that matchup on April 26th, April 26th could very easily be the most eventful and most impactful game for the NHL postseason. Because by April 26th, we will know most likely if Vegas and Dallas are battling for the 8th seed. Understand that Dallas and Vegas is going to be competing head-to-head for that 8th seed on April 26th, and it's going to be great. So I'm going to really be interested to see what happens with Dallas, and I'll be interested to see what happens with Vegas. And when it comes to this situation, I really am curious to see what happens there. And I want to get into one last thing before we end the show. Anybody who knows your host, Ian Rakelli, this is episode 5 of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. However, I'm a big fan of Formula One. I love watching Formula One. I'm a big fan of IndyCar. Tomorrow is the Australian Grand Prix. You have Charles Leclerc going to start on pole, Max Verstappen P2, Sergio Perez in P3, and Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion, in P4. I will say that tomorrow morning, when you see the Australian Grand Prix and you're going to be seeing the best of the best compete in auto racing, it's going to be fascinating because understand that Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen had the competitive battle in Bahrain. You also had the situation in Jeddah where you had Verstappen and Leclerc battle again. So it looks like for the first time in 15 years, a guy not named Lewis Hamilton is competing for a championship. It really feels like for the first time in a long time, a guy like Lewis Hamilton is not the odds-on favorite to win week in and week out. So the new blood in Formula One is nice to see, and I will also be really curious to see if Red Bull and Ferrari continue this rivalry for the next couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see if throughout the entire season, is there going to be anybody who has what it takes to dethrone Aston Martin and Ferrari, or is it just going to be a 1-2 battle in the constructors, 1-2 battle in the points? Because Leclerc and Verstappen are two young guys. They've been competing forever. They even competed back in go-karts. And they know that they're going to be the two guys who everyone's going to watch out for. And they're going to be the two people that, well, ironically, are going to be competing for the championship. So I will say that Ferrari and Red Bull, that's going to be a fun matchup to watch. And watching the fireworks on the track and off the track are going to be incredible. So, as we're getting towards the end of the show, here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media, I want to say subscribe to our YouTube channel at PR Connections and subscribe to the Sports Angles YouTube channel, so Sports Angle on PR. We also have a Facebook page, Sports Angle on PR, and subscribe to the PR Connections Radio Facebook page. They make a lot of great content there. There's some excellent creators who are part of PR Connections Radio, and we should definitely try to have them on the show sometime. And when it comes to PR Connections Radio, they have their website now, prconnectionsradio.com. Great content, great creators, and there is a lot of content for you to watch. I highly recommend going to prconnectionsradio.com and watching all of their content, watch all of the creators, and give them a lot of shout-outs. I also will say on Twitter, Sports Angle on PR, I answer a lot of questions about the NFL draft. I answer questions about the NFL. We focus on the NFL world when it comes to our Twitter account. With our Instagram at Sports Angle on PR, we post a lot of hockey content. We post about the Vegas Golden Knights, talk about the Vancouver Canucks, the rest of the Western Division, and the 8th seed battle going on right now on PR, on Sports Angle on PR, on Instagram. So I will say that it's going to be a lot of content coming up there. And our YouTube channel, we are going to post some content on that side of it as well. So I will say stay tuned for that. I also want to give a quick shout out real quick to one of my good friends. His name is Joshua Bailey. He did a show, Stay Tuned. Does that every Tuesday night. Definitely want to give a shout out to him. And before we go, we have about 5 minutes left, I wanted to give a brief recap on some sporting events the Sports Angle and PR Connections Radio went to recently. We went to the Las Vegas ballpark, saw UNLV baseball take on Arizona State, and a great walk-off wild pitch, which is something you don't see that often, but a walk-off wild pitch. UNLV won the game. They beat Arizona State. It was a magnificent game, and honestly, I give a lot of respect to Las Vegas ballpark and a lot of respect to UNLV baseball and Arizona State baseball for putting on the performance. Also, recently, we went to the season opener for the Las Vegas Aviators, the AAA baseball team here in Las Vegas. They took on their in-state rival, Reno Aces, to begin the year. Las Vegas Aviators, they won the game. It was a very tight, very close game, but the Las Vegas Aviators started out the season with a win in dominating fashion, and the Las Vegas Aviators are hoping to build off that momentum and have a great season this year with the Las Vegas Aviators. They're going to continue their series with the Reno Aces, and then they're going to have a fantastic 130-game season with the Las Vegas Aviators. And I would recommend watching all of the local Las Vegas teams, giving them a lot of respect and a lot of attention. You got the Bull Ring at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. They're going to be doing their races on Saturday nights. Las Vegas Aviators, minor league baseball. Henderson Silver Knights with minor league hockey out there in Henderson. And you also have the Las Vegas Aces, the WNBA team. They're going to be starting their season later in May, and there's going to be a lot of action-packed drama there. And when it comes to the Las Vegas Aces, it's a great time, great game of basketball. I highly recommend watching it. And you also had the announcement that Formula One is coming to Las Vegas in November of 2023. And that is going to be great for the economy. It's going to be great for fans of Formula One. And it's going to be great for the sport of auto racing to have a race for the first time since 1982 be in Las Vegas. And one last topic with Las Vegas to talk about is the announcement that tickets for the NBA Summer League are now on sale. So the NBA Summer League, which takes place in July every single year, that is going to be once again in Las Vegas at the Thomas & Mack Center. So go get your tickets there. Watch the best rookies and second-year players in the NBA at the NBA Summer League at the Thomas & Mack. So this is the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Follow me on all social medias at Ian Rickelli18 and follow all the show's platforms at the Sports Angle on PR. And also, I'm going to give a shout out real quick to all of the platforms for PR Connections, the website prconnectionsradio.com, Facebook at PR Connections Radio, and also go to our YouTube channel, PR Connections Radio. And once again, this was the Sports Angle on prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media, and I will highly recommend checking out the website, prconnectionsradio.com. So this is Ian Rickelli, and until next time, have a good one, and we will see you later.